Hi, my name is Maci Kantorowski, and this is my digital story on my midterm paper, The Cold War. So, the Cold War was a 46-year geopolitical conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, lasting from 1945 to 1991. While the two nations had allied to defeat Nazi Germany during World War II, their partnership quickly turned into rivalry due to ideological differences, capitalism versus communism. As Europe struggled to rebuild, the U.S., economically powerful, promoted democracy, while the USSR aimed to spread communism. This division set the stage for decades of political, military, and cultural tension. When I began researching the Cold War, it made me realize how this political struggle hadn't just been political, but also cultural. It changed the way I thought of global relationships. So, the Cold War officially began when President Truman took action against Soviet expansion in the Middle East. In 1946, the Soviets violated agreements to leave Iran, prompting Truman to send an ultimatum. His response led to the Truman Doctrine in 1947, which provided economic and military aids to countries threatened by communism. The Marshall Plan followed in 1948, offering financial assistance to rebuild war-torn Europe. These actions made it clear to the Soviets that the U.S. would prevent the spread of communism, intensifying the Cold War. In 1948, the Soviet blockaded Berlin in an attempt to control the entire city. The U.S. responded with the Berlin Airlift, delivering supplies to the city. The Soviets formed the Warsaw Pact, and the U.S. created NATO in 1949, a military alliance to counter Soviet threats. The formation of these alliances marked to the start of a prolonged military standoff between East and West. The Korean War in 1950 was the first major proxy war, with the U.S. supporting South Korea and the USSR backing North Korea. The war ended in a stalemate, but showed the U.S. commitment to containing communism. At home, fear of communism grew, leading to the McCarthyism. Senator Joseph McCarthy accused many of being communist sympathizers, damaging reputations and civil liberties. This period of paranoia and repression marked a dark chapter in American history, and it kind of reflected the cultural aspect in history as well. The Cold War extended beyond the battlefield into space. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, prompting the U.S. to accelerate its space program. This marked the start of the space race, a symbolic competition between the two superpowers. Meanwhile, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The Soviets placed missiles in Cuba, prompting a tense standoff with the U.S., which resulted in a peaceful resolution, but underscored the dangers of Cold War rivalry. In Vietnam, the U.S. fought to prevent the spread of communism, but by 1975, the war ended in defeat for the U.S. The Vietnam War exposed the limits of American power and sparked widespread protest at home, leading to a reevaluation of U.S. foreign policy. Despite the setback, the Cold War continued, and the Soviet Union expanded its influence into Afghanistan in 1979. So, the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. By the 1980s, the Cold War began to wind down. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 symbolized the collapse of communist control in Eastern Europe. The Soviet Union, weakened by economic and political turmoil, it finally dissolved in 1991, ending the Cold War. So, in conclusion, the Cold War shaped the world we live in today. It left lasting political, economic, and cultural legacies, such as the spread of democracy and capitalism, and the establishment of international institutions like NATO. The tensions of this period also led to significant technological advances, especially in space exploration. Studying the Cold War helps us understand the importance of diplomacy, the dangers of unchecked powers, and the need for global cooperation to prevent future conflicts. So this was my speech. Thank you for listening.